It's amazing how fast time goes. You know, we were just having a conversation with my next guest, TK Pooe, and we were talking about last year this time. It wasn't today, it was actually yesterday that we were all sitting at Nasrec and we were waiting for the announcement of who the next ANC president was going to be. And just by those couple of votes, President Cyril Ramaphosa managed to take that over. And that was a year ago. Can you believe it? Goodness me. All right, we were just reminiscing about that. And fast forward 364 days, and here we sit. Next year, of course, is what we're looking at, where we begin the academic year for many new students in tertiary education. And this morning, we're looking at the effectiveness of technical and vocational education and training colleges. I suppose you know them better as TVET colleges and their role in the country's economy. Studying at a TVET is not as popular as a university education, but recently the Democratic Alliance told Parliament that 60% of TVET colleges are dysfunctional. On the flip side, though, Kate Wilkinson, a senior researcher at Africa Check, said she thought the DA claim was misleading. So what are the pros and what are the cons of going and getting a TVET education? To discuss this further, we're joined in studio by TK Pooe, a public policy specialist, and he's also a lecturer at the University of the Northwest. Good to see you, TK. Thanks for coming in.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
I suppose it's nice that we're doing this conversation before you've got your students that are jostling for next year. Although, I mean, at this point in time, you've got to wait for your results to come out and then you start applying, or should the applications, I suppose, already be in?
They normally are in. I think
Yeah,
we just have to
be.
wait for. I always get confused. I think it used to be December. Now here it's January.
Yeah.
So, but I think by January they flow through to the department, and then the rush begins.
But there's obviously people know what they want to do. They want to, you know, whether they want to study at a university or go to a TVET college. But I suppose let's get the difference now between a TVET college and university education. Well, what is the primary difference between the two?
Well, a TVET college, I think, as you correctly said, talks about vocational training, which is, it's more practical. It's meant to be more practical, more on-the-job type of training. I think it's almost as though we're supposed to be able to put you into any industry very quickly, and you're supposed to have the technical skills to actually learn on the job. While a university classically has always been about, you get to know the theory, and the belief is that, look, you will never know, a graduate should know, will never know properly what happens in the real work industry. So we accept that, look, it'll take you probably about 5 years to actually know what's happening. But the key thing is it's more heavily based on theory, and this theory is about you being able to apply it over the years. So you never really get to know it. So the key thing is that's practicality versus the theorization of what you're supposed to do.
You know, you look at TVET colleges and perhaps, I don't know, maybe some people are not having the right impression of what a TVET college is. A lot of times people think of boilers and woodwork and things like that. But, you know, when you go to a TVET college, what kind of career prospects are there for people when you come out? And the reality is you get a skill.
And I think that's why I think I like the way he started it by saying the impression.
Yeah.
It's actually been looked down upon. Look, I'm always being criticized for being heavy on government. One of the things that the former Minister of Higher Education actually tried to do, Dr. Blaine Zamande, was actually to popularize it.
Yeah.
Because the key thing is, especially looking at South Africa's condition, it actually should not be about what the preference is, should be what is the industry calling upon. And you're right in saying that is really been the big mark and the big difference, that students have, I think, have overly glamorized what it means to be at varsity. Look, if you ask most children where they want to go, they already have a UCT, a UKZN in their mind, and they've got a VET. But when you actually ask them, but what do you actually want to do? And that becomes a bit more murky. So say, well, I just want to be at varsity. And this is where I think we've not taken advantage fully of what TVETs are. And the key example I always use, if you look at Germany, the German economy is actually held up by people who've come from TVET colleges, which is supported by industry. Yeah. It's actually where the South African weakness is. If people think of Bavarian Motorworks, better known as BMW. BMW actually gets most of its workers in Germany from TVET colleges. They actually most of I think the technical skills they get from there, they actually go down, speak to TVETs and tell them, listen, this is what the industry wants currently, so this is what you produce. Yeah. Now, in South Africa, there's actually a disjuncture, hence I think TVETs are not that glamorous, because there's that breakdown between what TVETs are supposed to do and what industry is supposed to do. And I think that's what we actually need to fix at the moment.
It's quite fascinating because, you know, we keep on talking about the lack of skills that we have and the factories that are closing down and the manufacturing industry is struggling. is that in part got to do with the lack of skills, or is it just that we're seeing a shrinking in those industries, and hence people are thinking, well, why must I bother getting that skill if I can't practice it?
Well, that's the key thing. If you remember in the building of Medupi, what the key cry was, as you said, it was where the boiler makers, where the electricians.
Yeah.
And we actually had to import a lot of them. If you look at I think is it Huawei, I think it was high tech at the time, they had to actually import a lot of Asian workers from India who were actually very good at this. So it's an issue of saying that's where our problem is, that we are not really readily getting our students into it. How can you have manufacturing and even beneficiation when the key people you're supposed to have actually going to go do a degree such as a Bachelor of Arts? It's not actually supposed to work out like that. And if you actually look at the German model again, they actually have 3 streams. It's what they call the Technasi, which is what we call TVET Colleges, the Gymnasiums, which is to say, listen, there is no shame in being able to say I can use my hands. One of the things that made Zimbabwe, I think Mugabe's Zimbabwe so great was that they actually said, listen, not every student needs to go to varsity. And I think South Africa has a hangover, and it's partially because of our British background, that we say, listen, the key thing and the people we look for are people at varsities. In the world, it's actually not the case.
Yeah.
That's where I think most countries, even the Chinese, if you look at South Korea and Samsung, what they've basically done to say, listen, the vast majority of your population will never go into varsity, and it's not a shame. And I think that's where we need to really change the psyche of most South Africans.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I'll never forget a conversation that I had with a CEO of a major company here in South Africa, and I mean, he was a very clever man, and his friend asked him, can my son just spend the day with you, just to see sort of what you do, and maybe you can give him advice into his future. And he did, and he said to me, and you know what I told him to become? I said, no, what? I mean, like, we'll go and study like law, accounting, or whatever. He said, no, I told him to go and study to become a plumber. And after he'd become a plumber, go and get a business degree, open up your own business with a skill, and then you'll make money. And that was some of the most interesting advice that I'd ever gotten, because there seems to be this, perhaps it is a myth, that going to a TVET college or getting a skill is for people that actually just are not good enough for university, or they're not clever enough for university. But you keep on mentoring going and getting a BA as opposed to walking out with an actual skill and degree that you can go and get a job with. So those myths, again, can we try and sort of dispel them?
I think if you look forward, I think the 4th industrial revolution, what most people have looked at it to say, listen, you're big engineering, but the key question is, who's going to build these? I think I saw one of your newspaper headings, it said, automation of homes is now in South Africa.
Yeah.
Now, the key thing we need to ask as South Africans is, who's going to build it? Because it's one thing for you to be able to get, I mean, look, I'm a product of varsity, so my employer has to say, I love varsity, I love where I am. But the point is to say, who actually builds these things? And this is where South Africa is not taking advantage of the fact that, okay, people are going to be able to automate, build cellular phones, but who's going to be able to build it? And I think that's where the key thing is, the thinking needs to change to say, listen, there is no stigma in you building something. If anything, we actually have to change our economy upside down to be able to say, listen, we need you to be able to have and open up your own businesses. And look, I think you've spoken to a lot of young people. Most of them say, listen, I want to own my own business. But the key thing is, so what are you going to own if you don't have the skill? Because varsity doesn't give you, it gives you the ability to critically think, but it's only after many years of actually working in an institution where you're able to say, okay, this is my core skill. And I think this is where we need to maybe change it a bit. And especially as the matriculate results are coming out, I can guarantee about 99% of those students only are thinking of varsities at the moment. Until we change that mindset, starting at grade 1, to say, listen, the future is actually going to need you in the 4th industrial revolution to be able to say, this is what skill I can bring as opposed to what a machine can do, or this is what skill I can add to a machine. And if we're not changing it now, I feel that, look, we're going to be left behind. And it's not only our problem. Even in America, they're actually having the same thing, to be able to say, listen, going to a Harvard, going to a Yale is not the only thing you can do in life.
Is it? Is it a status thing to understand that? Because, I mean, if I look back at the days when I was sort of finishing school, going to university, not everybody went to university, and it was never expected that everyone was going to get a university degree. There were some people that I suppose were programmed to be exceptionally sort of well-versed, whether it be in maths or this or that. And then you could see they were your engineers and they were going to go and study or be lawyers or whatever. But there were others that were like, no, you know what, it's not for me. I'm going to become a clothing designer, or I'm going to go and do this, and I'm going to get a skill and this. And it was never frowned upon. But it seems that through the years, it's become somewhat of a status thing to go to university, have this degree that you can actually do nothing with at the end of the day.
I think it also, like you said, it has its history in the fact that if you look at, I think especially during Kara Asmal time, the whole issue of saying, listen, we had a previously disadvantaged population, which was taken, which never had the right forcefully to go into higher education. But I think we kind of took it a bit too extreme. We never actually asked, what is this thing for?
Yeah.
I come from an area they always say, in the Vaal Triangle. The Vaal was known for previously ISCO and a lot of other, smaller manufacturing plants. And the high schools used to feed into that system. And it was almost like a self-sustaining environment where you'd be able to go to a high school, like I went to General Smuts High School, and there were two tracks. There were those who were going straight to varsity, and there were those who were able to say, listen, I'm good at motor mechanics,
Absolutely.
I'm good at ward work, and it was never frowned upon.
No.
But I think we actually broke it down. And also, if you look at, I always tell my students that the first thing they come in is that, listen, when you look at these series on TV looking at varsities, it's not like that.
No.
There's no flash that we're in the next semester. If anything, that's I always tell children, what you're basically going to be doing for most of my degree in public policy is 90% reading and your ability to think. So if you think it's going to be, I know people think of the nightlife at varsity.
Yes, they think of it's parties, frat parties, and drinking and
No.
partying.
They only happen the first 3 months, and then you're basically stressed, thinking, oh my word, what have I been doing most of the time?
What did I do this year? What have I done to myself? Let me bring up what I said in the beginning, was the fact that the DA mentioning that 60% of our TVET colleges are dysfunctional. I've got all the breakdown here, but I don't want to talk to that. I just want to get your opinions. I mean, do you think that there's, have you looked at our TVET colleges? Do you think they're in a state?
I think it's the All Africa check actually put into perspective, which is to say the DA doesn't define what it means by dysfunctional. My understanding of it was they were looking at a certain track within it, basically a certain certificate within TVET, which is stated to be, I think, dysfunctional. I think it only makes about 24% of the actual qualification. But I think what the bigger question they're raising is to say, listen, how have TVET colleges been looked after? I was actually just doing some reading on it, and there's a PhD from UP. He actually makes a point saying, look, the management of TVET and even the thinking around TVET, that's actually where the key problem is. By management, it is to say a lot of the people that are actually managing TVETs are not people who, how do you put it? I want to be kind in how I say it because it's December. They should not be there. It should be people who are able to market what a TVET does, should be able to actually understand the students that are coming through, and should actually be able to say, listen, are able to sit down with industry. Now, that's the key problem. That's where there's a dysfunctionality, is that a lot of the people that head TVET colleges don't have a direct link to industry. So you're basically working in an island in a silo by yourself, and you don't actually have a discussion with the people you're supposed to be producing the students for. So that's where the dysfunctionality comes from. And also, partially also what's happening within the education system, which is basically, again, which is to say, who is actually speaking to a lot of these TVET colleges, and who's actually linking them, and what's the future as we go forward? And that's where the dysfunctionality is. Not so much what the DA is saying, it's the issue of the broader question of saying, what is the future of TVETs, and how do we actually get students to actually love and appreciate that you can go to it.
Let's wrap up the conversation on that positive note. What is the future of TVET colleges? Because we've seen all these skills summits taking place, the job summits happening, all of these summits and discussions. This year was a year of discussions. I've never seen so many get-togethers and gatherings as you're well aware of. But one of the things was that you'd find that companies have been urged to partner up with TVET colleges. The college would give them the theoretical training and everything, and that company would take them in, use their skills, and then, of course, create jobs. Is this going to happen? I mean, do you think going forward, they've pledged to do it? Will it happen?
And I'm never a big believer in talk. I like contracts and I like seeing end results, but that's where we should be heading. I always do this thing at the beginning of the year. I look at the international demand for what are the big skills that are going to be needed in the future. And I think over the last 10 years, the key ones have been agro-processing, manufacturing, and also a bit of chemicals. So the key issue is to say, are we able to tap our TVET colleges to be able to actually meet that demand? And also to be able to say, listen, maybe even thinking outside South Africa, can we produce a type of students coming from TVETs that can actually help the African continent as it continues to grow? Because I think there also has to be a break, almost like a bubble bursting, to say, look, just because you're born in South Africa, you school in South Africa, doesn't mean you only have to work in South Africa. The continent is on the move, and why can't we tap into what the continent is doing?
Thank you for joining us. Great chatting to you. Have a wonderful break. I hope you enjoy the festive season as well. TK Pooe, Public Policy Specialist, Lecturer at the University of the Northwest, talking to us about TVET colleges in South Africa.